They stared at her like she'd walked out of the wrong story. That was the first thing that struck her. Not the heat, not the waiting jet, but the look. Tight-lipped, doubtful, measured. As if seeing her there, in tailored clothes and sunglasses, stepping out of that bronze SUV was too strange for their minds to accept. The air shimmered with 83 degrees of morning heat. The Miami sun was already stretching its fingers across the sky, and the scent of jet fuel danced with salt from the nearby coast. Avery Blake stepped out of the vehicle like she belonged in that moment, because she did. Her Navy travel suit hugged her frame with quiet power, the kind that didn't ask for permission. She wore black heels that struck the tarmac with crisp rhythm, like a metronome counting the years she'd worked to get here. Her hair was pulled back in a sharp twist, not a strand out of place. Her gold-rimmed sunglasses hid eyes that had spent the last 3 days reading pitch decks and mentoring young founders at the Women Forward Summit. The panel she'd just spoken on, packed. People stood against the walls just to hear her talk about scaling tech startups in underfunded cities. She didn't come to inspire. She came to build. She was the keynote. Behind her was Lena, her assistant, voice coming clear through the Bluetooth piece in Avery's ear. Flight plans filed. Weather's good all the way to Atlanta. Your snack. Box is already on board. But, new pilot, someone named Kyle. He's not our usual. That made her slow slightly as she approached the aircraft. At the base of the jet's stairway stood a man in a crisp uniform, clipboard in hand. Tall, pale, early 40s maybe. His aviators mirrored the sky. The tag on his chest read, Kyle Merritt. He looked up, almost reluctantly, giving her a forced smile that didn't quite touch his eyes. His tone was flat, professional, but hollow. Good morning. This flight is reserved for Ms. Avery Blake. She paused at the bottom step. Yes, that's me. He blinked. Didn't smile, didn't move. His eyes flicked from her face to her suit, down to the designer laptop bag over her shoulder. And then he chuckled, not loud, just enough to sting. There must be a mistake, he said, stiffening his posture. This aircraft is assigned to someone else. Ms. Blake is the lead passenger on the manifest. Avery held her ground. Her voice calm, clear. That's me. Avery Blake, founder and CEO of Nexora Labs. This is my charter. For a split second, something flashed in Kyle's face. Hesitation, a flicker of realization. But it passed, replaced by protocol. He stepped forward, blocking the stairs. Not rudely, but firmly, like a polite security fence. I'll need to ask you to wait while we sort this out, he said. Security policy. I hope you understand. Avery's fingers tightened around the handle of her bag. Her heart kicked once. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she reached inside her blazer and calmly pulled out her government ID, the digital charter confirmation on her phone, and even a photo of her boarding the same, plane 2 weeks ago. I do understand. You're doing your job, she said slowly. But everything's in order. This jet is mine. He glanced at her screen, didn't really read anything, and said, We've had imposters before. I'll have to confirm this with corporate. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was loud. The kind of silence that hums when judgment has already been made. Avery took a slow breath, pressing down the emotion that threatened to rise. If I were a tall white man in khakis and a golf cap, would you be offering me champagne right now? Kyle's jaw moved slightly, but he didn't reply. Instead, he turned away, speaking in hushed tones into his radio. Behind him, the jet gleamed under the morning light. The last 3 digits on the tail, AVB, her initials, her plane, her contract, her company. 7 years of building code, pitching investors, navigating tech rooms where she was the only woman of color. In sight. She'd climbed every ladder and built new ones when they didn't exist. And now, this man was telling her, quietly, politely, that she didn't belong. She tapped her phone. Lena picked up on the first ring. "We've got a situation," Avery said. "I'm calling Charter Jet Alliance now," Lena replied instantly. Just then, another man walked over. Older, stockier, a gray beard framed his weathered face. His badge read, "Brandon Fielding, Operations." He glanced at Avery, then went straight to Kyle. The two men spoke in whispers again, like she wasn't there. Like the woman standing next to the plane bearing her initials was background noise. Avery folded her arms, watching them. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was cold and sharp. "Are you both going to talk around me or to me?" Fielding turned, overly polite. "Ma'am, we're just verifying a few details. It's a quick process." She tilted her head. "And while you do that, should I wait out here on the tarmac, just in case someone forgets I paid for this flight?" He gave a small shrug. "Standard checks, ma'am." She raised an eyebrow. "Standard for who?" Neither of them had an answer. It wasn't the first time Avery Blake had been mistaken for someone she wasn't. But never like this. Never while standing beside a jet she paid for. Never while being told with a straight face that she couldn't be herself. Behind her, a woman with platinum hair and flawless yoga pants breezed through security. No ID check, no clipboard, not even a glance. A designer tote on her arm, earbuds in, and a smile from the guard as he waved her through like she owned the place. Avery's breath slowed, not from shock. She had stopped being surprised long ago, but from that quiet fire she'd learned to tame, the one that rose in her chest every time someone looked her in the eye and still didn't see her. "I've had this charter contract for over 3 years," she said, voice firm and steady. "I fly this route twice a month. I don't rent this jet, I lease it. I pay the crew. That includes your paycheck." Pilot Kyle Merritt finally lifted his head. His expression didn't shift much, just a flick of the brow, a slight twitch in his jaw. "You're saying you're Avery Blake?" She stared at him, silent, just for a moment, then answered with the same precision she used when defending her company to skeptical investors. "I've said that 4 times already." He tilted his head as if trying to squint the truth into something more palatable. "I'm just having trouble believing that." And there it was. Not protocol, not policy, just doubt. Plain, unfiltered disbelief. The kind that wrapped itself in uniforms and regulations but was really just fear wearing a badge. Avery's voice dropped a note lower. "Why is that? Why is it hard to believe?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. His gaze flicked toward the operations manager standing beside him, Brandon Fielding, the gray-bearded man who had spoken earlier but said nothing now. He took a small step back, as if realizing something heavy was about to fall and didn't want to be in its path. Avery stepped forward, slow and deliberate, her heels clicking against the pavement like a ticking clock. "You know what stays with me the most?" she said. "It's not that you assumed I didn't belong. I'm used to that. I've been mistaken for the assistant, the intern, the guest speaker's guest." She paused. "What's different is this. You didn't even consider I could be her. Not for a second. Not even by mistake. Your mind never made the jump." Kyle narrowed his eyes, starting to speak, but Avery didn't let him. "You looked at me and decided immediately I wasn't the person listed on that manifest, not because of a policy, but because your idea of what ownership looks like doesn't include someone like me." He shifted his stance, finally uncomfortable. "That's not... I didn't mean it like that." Avery nodded, not kindly. "But you did. You just didn't think I'd say it out loud." Before another word could be exchanged, her phone buzzed again. She looked down. "Lena." She answered. "Talk to me." Lena's voice was crisp and fast. "Just got off the call with Alliance Jet's VP of Operations. They're furious. The CEO is calling you in 2 minutes. Don't move. Avery's lips curled into a small, tight smile. Not from joy, but something colder. Precision. She turned the phone just slightly so both men could hear her next words. "My assistant's on the line with your bosses," she said, "and the only thing that needs verifying right now is how fast you can apologize." Neither man had time to respond before a sleek silver sedan slid to a stop on the tarmac. The door opened and out stepped a woman who walked like she already knew how this story ended. Sharp maroon suit, low black heels, a black leather folder under one arm, and a phone already pressed to her ear. Jordan Lee, regional liaison for Alliance Jet. She didn't slow down, didn't smile, didn't ask who was who. She walked straight through the scene like it was already handled. Avery exhaled, almost inaudibly. She knew Jordan. She'd spoken to her on investor panels and seen her hold an entire boardroom in the palm of her hand. Kyle, however, had no idea. "Who's this?" he asked, stepping protectively in front of the stairs like the aircraft was sacred ground. "Jordan Lee," she said coolly, tucking her phone away. "Corporate oversight. You must be the new pilot on the Blake route?" He stood straighter. "Yes, ma'am, first week." "Well," she said without a hint of warmth, "we'll be reviewing your onboarding session soon." Avery crossed her arms, watching the man who had blocked her path now try to shrink into professionalism. Jordan turned to her. "Miss Blake, I'm deeply sorry. This never should have happened." Avery stayed silent. She was waiting for the excuses, the justifications, the cleanup. Kyle cleared his throat. "I was only trying to follow proper ID. Protocols. She had everything," Jordan cut in, stepping forward. "Her ID, her booking confirmation, a digital contract. If you'd simply scanned the QR code on her phone, the one you were trained to use during intake, you'd have seen her name match the manifest aircraft tag and crew assignments." Kyle's face flushed, but he held the line. "I just didn't want a security breach." "You nearly caused one," Jordan replied, "from the wrong end." He opened his mouth again, but this time Brandon Fielding took another step back, clearly wanting to distance himself from the fallout. Avery finally spoke. Her tone was clear, unwavering. "He looked me in the face and told me he didn't believe I could be me." Jordan turned to the pilot, her expression unreadable. "Is that true?" He hesitated. "I didn't say it like that." "But you said it." He looked down. The silence hung, weighty and charged. Jordan let it linger for another beat, then turned to Avery. "Would you like to board now?" Avery nodded once. "Yes, I would." She turned toward the stairs. But just as her foot touched the first step, Kyle called out, "I didn't mean to offend anyone. It's not about race." She paused, turned her head, slow and controlled. "Then what was it?" she asked. "My jacket? My hair texture? My skin tone? If it's not race, what exactly triggered your disbelief?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Avery climbed step by step, silent. At the top, she turned and looked down at the men still standing on the pavement. Her voice was calm but sharp, enough to cut glass. "You looked at a black woman holding all the right documents and your mind short-circuited. I've gone through TSA with less questioning. But if I were a tall white man in a Patagonia vest carrying golf clubs, you'd have asked if I wanted coffee." Jordan didn't flinch. She turned to Kyle. "Mr. Merritt, leave your badge and company phone with operations. You'll be contacted by HR." He blinked. "Wait, are you firing me?" "That's all I can say at this time." He stood frozen for a moment like he still didn't believe what was happening. Inside the jet, Avery exhaled and sat, down, buckled in. The scent of citrus and leather welcomed her, but it didn't comfort her. Not yet. She glanced at the black walnut trim, the soft cream seats, the brass nameplate by the door. Blake. Her name, her space. And still, someone tried to push her out. She opened her phone, tapped the camera. She never filmed moments like this. She was private, strategic. But today, something was different. Today, silence felt like surrender. She looked into the lens, hit record. I'm sitting inside my own jet, a plane I've paid for, a route I take every other week. And this morning, I was told I wasn't me. She paused. I had my ID, my booking, my face. And still, I wasn't enough. She breathed, looked straight into the camera. This happens every day, to women, especially black women. But no one sees it. No one believes it, until you turn on the camera. She ended the video, saved it. She didn't know what would happen when she posted it. She wasn't chasing clicks. But deep inside, she felt something shift. Not just in her, in the air. The world had seen her. Now it was their turn to watch. The wheels hadn't even lifted off the runway before the story left the ground without her. As the jet's engines began to hum and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, Avery Blake leaned back in her seat, trying to find calm. She wasn't thinking about headlines. She wasn't thinking about justice. Not yet. She just wanted her pulse to slow. She opened her phone, tapped the video she'd recorded on the tarmac, and hesitated for a beat before posting it, not to the world, but to her private account. Just a handful of close friends, colleagues, women she'd mentored or worked alongside for years. She wrote one line above it. Sometimes even your name isn't enough. Then she closed her phone and looked out the window, not expecting anything. But in less than an hour, while she was still in the air, the video started moving. It was first reshared by Nia Wallace, a young founder Avery had mentored in her accelerator, then by Marcella Green, a venture capitalist from Seattle. Then a journalist in Dallas tweeted it with the caption, "If this can happen to someone like Avery Blake, imagine the rest of us." By the time Avery landed in Atlanta, her name was trending on 3 platforms. Her inbox was filling with messages. Journalists, former interns, strangers, all of them saying the same thing in different ways. I saw this. I've lived this. Thank you. But what stopped Avery cold wasn't the shares or the hashtags. It was a phone call. Quiet. Direct. Mid-flight. She was sipping water, trying to recenter, when the flight attendant leaned over. "There's a secure call for you, Ms. Blake. The line is from the Alliance Jet Executive Office." Avery blinked. "Who?" "Mr. Douglas Tran," the attendant said softly. "He says he's the CEO." Avery nodded once, took the headset. "Ms. Blake?" The voice that came through was low, calm, and unscripted. "This is Douglas Tran. I'm calling to offer a personal apology." He didn't sound rehearsed. No PR tone, no damage control lingo. He sounded like a man who had just watched something that shook him. "I've reviewed the incident myself," he continued. "Footage, logs, the full transcript of the pilot's communication with the ground team." Avery stayed silent. She needed to hear where this was going. "You were profiled," he said plainly. "That much is clear. And we failed you, not just as a client, but as a human being." Still, Avery didn't speak. Not yet. "I want you to know," he said, "we've already terminated the pilot. That decision is final. But this call isn't about optics. It's personal." She sat up slightly. That was new. "My daughter's 16, he said after a pause. "She's half black, half Vietnamese. A few months ago, mall security stopped her because they didn't believe she could afford the coat she was wearing. She had the receipt. Still, they made her call me from the store." Avery closed her eyes for a second. That landed. "I can't undo what happened to you today," Tran said. "But I want you to know, it mattered, that you spoke up, that you didn't let it slide. It mattered. Finally, Avery found her voice. "I didn't plan to film it," she said softly. "But the way he looked at me, the certainty in his face that I couldn't be who I said I was, that stayed with me." "It's not just you," Tran replied. "It's the cost of this kind of thinking. We lose talent. We lose trust. We lose time." A silence passed between them, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt earned. "I'd like to meet you in person," he added. "No cameras, no statements, just to listen." Avery nodded, though he couldn't see her. "I'll think about it." They exchanged a few more words. Nothing flashy, no promises, just honest, clean language. She removed the headset and exhaled. Her heart still thumped, not from anger, but from something heavier. A slow ache, a realization that refused to leave her alone. How many times had she been doubted? How often had she walked into a room and been treated like she needed permission to be brilliant? She thought back to the pilot's tone. The way he had said, "You're saying you are Avery Blake?" Not a question, a challenge, an erasure. She didn't want revenge, that wasn't her spirit. But she did want truth, unvarnished, uninterrupted. She tapped the video again, watched her own face in the frame, calm, clear, honest. Then she opened her inbox, scrolled past media requests and corporate outreach. One message caught her eye. It was from a woman named Taryn Holt, a stranger. "I watched your video in my car outside Target and cried," it said. "2 months ago, a cop asked if the Tesla I was driving was mine. I had the lease in the glove box. But I just said yes and drove off. I wish I'd done what you did. Thank you for making me feel seen." Avery stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered. What she didn't know was that Taryn's message was only the first of thousands. Emails, DMs, comments, all pouring in. A black realtor locked out of a gated neighborhood while showing a home. A Latina physician mistaken for a nurse, twice, in the same hospital. An Indian woman pulled aside in first class and asked if she had accidentally taken the wrong seat. The stories came fast. Some loud, some quiet, all real. Avery had spent most of her life solving complex technical problems, building platforms, simplifying systems, removing bugs. But what happened on that tarmac? There was no clean fix for that, no tidy code. By sunrise the next day, her video had crossed 2.6 million views. It was just 45 seconds. No tears, no anger, just one woman telling the truth with steady eyes. But somehow, that hit harder than any outburst ever could. The internet didn't just respond. It erupted. Comment threads turned into confessionals. Posts became testimonies. It was like her voice had turned up the volume in a room full of whispers. But what came next? That she didn't expect. 2 days later, Alliance Jet posted a statement. But it wasn't a polished PR spin or a vague apology buried in corporate fluff. The subject line read, "We failed Avery Blake. Here's why it matters." The message didn't sugarcoat. It said their system was designed around visual verification, assumptions, basically. It admitted their new hire training didn't cover implicit bias, that their protocol hadn't been violated. It just hadn't been built with someone like Avery in mind. And at the end, they added something no one expected. "We have invited Ms. Blake to speak directly to our board. She has accepted." 3 days later, Avery stood in a glass-walled boardroom in San Diego. Across the long oak table sat 8 board members, some leaning back, some upright, some visibly uncomfortable. There were no cameras, no PR team, just Avery, in the same Navy travel suit she'd worn in Miami, same sharp posture, same energy. She didn't start with pleasantries. "I'm not here for a settlement," she said, "and I don't need a scholarship fund in my name." She paused, scanning their faces. "I'm here because I built something, and then I was treated like a fraud. In front of a jet I pay for." That line landed like thunder. You should be terrified by that, she continued, not because of how it affects your brand, but because it shows how your people, your system, see black women who dare to occupy space. A chair creaked softly at the far end of the boardroom table. One of the directors shifted, uncomfortable. Avery Blake didn't flinch. She had grown used to these silences, the kind that arrived not from reflection but from discomfort. She stood straight in front of them all, shoulders relaxed, eyes unwavering. Bias, she said, her voice even and firm, is not always loud. She let the words settle before continuing. Sometimes it's clean, polished, smiling, dressed, in a uniform and calling itself protocol. And it hides in the spaces you don't audit, assumptions. Someone exhaled slowly. A woman across the table cleared her throat and tried to offer something. We're considering new training models, she said, careful with her words. Avery tilted her head, measured her reply, then cut in, clear, sharp, calm. That's not enough. She didn't say it with anger. She said it with certainty. If your training doesn't include lived experience, it's just another checkbox in your handbook. Bias isn't a bug in your system. It's the framework, the code you wrote the whole company on. She took a single step forward. And if you don't rewrite that code completely, it'll keep running quietly in the background, affecting every gate, every hire, every opportunity, every time. The room was still. Then a quiet voice spoke from the far corner, a man who hadn't said a single word all meeting. David Lang, late 60s, silver hair, heavy expression. My wife is black, he said softly. She used to tell me about being followed in stores, about strangers assuming she didn't belong in our neighborhood. He swallowed hard. Once, a neighbor asked if she was the cleaning lady. I laughed, at the time. Thought it was just ignorance. I didn't really get how much it hurt, not until she stopped telling me about it. Silence again. But this one wasn't cold. It was real. Avery gave a small nod, not performative, not out of pity, out of understanding. I'm not here to cancel anyone, she said. This isn't about dragging names through headlines or chasing apologies. She paused. It's about accountability, because if your system doesn't believe someone like me belongs in the room, then someone like me has to prove she does, every single day, in every single space. She scanned the table. And that's exhausting. The board didn't rush to respond this time. They didn't hide behind policies or pivot to PR. They sat with her words. By the end of the meeting, there was no applause, no handshake, photo, just a quiet agreement, a unanimous decision to begin a top-down review of their hiring, training, and evaluation systems. It wasn't a full solution. Not yet, but it was movement. Avery didn't smile. She didn't feel victory, but she did feel something shift. When she stepped outside the glass building into the California sun, her phone buzzed. Another message. This one was from a man named Cedric, from Arizona. You didn't ask to be the example, the message read, but thank you for becoming one anyway. Avery stood, still on the sidewalk, her fingers closed around the phone. The message didn't feel heavy. It felt familiar, because she didn't feel like an example. She felt tired, but the story wasn't done. Not yet. Something strange had happened after. She stopped trying to keep everyone else comfortable. After she let truth ring out without softening the edges, it didn't just spread, it stuck. A week later, she stood barefoot in her backyard, holding her phone in one hand while her dog chased squirrels near the back fence. The sky was pale blue, the trees barely moved. The world was quiet, but her inbox wasn't. She hadn't checked her email in 2 days. She'd needed space, quiet, but the world hadn't stopped talking. And this time, it wasn't just talking about her. It was talking about what her moment meant. CNN called, then NBC. Then a morning show offered to fly her to Los Angeles for a sit-down interview. She turned them all down. Not out of pride, not even privacy. She said no because she didn't want to be turned into a symbol people pointed at without understanding the weight she carried. That morning, a neighbor she barely knew waved across the fence. "I saw your video," she said. "I showed it to my teenage son. He needed to see that." Avery smiled politely. "Thank you." Then she went back inside. She wasn't angry anymore, but she wasn't at peace either. She was just aware, more than ever, of how much work still had to be done. Not just in one company, on a human level. This wasn't about one pilot, or one incident on one hot morning in Miami. It was about all the moments that came before it. The job interviews where she was more qualified than anyone in the room and still overlooked. The investor pitches where she was mistaken for someone's assistant. The way people raised their eyebrows when she introduced herself as CEO. The glances her husband got when he picked her up from meetings in her Porsche, like they were wondering what he did to afford it and how someone like her fit in. It added up every time. That's why she recorded the video. Not to go viral, not to ignite outrage, but because silence had started to feel like permission, and she was done giving permission to be erased. The craziest part? Her inbox was still filling up every hour. From strangers, co-workers, women she'd never met, mothers, teenagers, executives, assistants, some black, some not, all saying the same thing. "Thank you for saying something when I couldn't." That evening, her phone rang. Lena. "Just checking in. How are you holding up?" Avery sank into her couch, pulled a soft throw blanket across her lap. "I'm tired," she said, "but not sorry." "You shouldn't be." There was a pause. "You know," Lena added, "we always talk about representation, how it matters. But what you did, that wasn't just representation." She paused, voice gentler now. "That was resistance. That was reclaiming space." Avery didn't respond at first. Then she said quietly, "It shouldn't have to be resistance. I should just be able to get on a plane." Lena sighed. "You're right. But we're not there yet." They sat in shared silence for a moment, both understanding what that meant. Then Avery asked, "Did we ever hear back from Jordan?" "Oh, yeah," Lena said, brightening. "She sent a huge bouquet of flowers and a handwritten note. Said you reminded her why she took the job in the first place." Avery smiled a little. "That's good." Outside, the sun was sinking low, spilling burnt orange light across the floor. Her dog was curled up near the fireplace, chest rising and falling slowly. Avery reached for her journal, a leather one she hadn't touched in months. She opened it to a blank page and began to write. "I didn't choose the moment, but I chose what to do with it, and that was enough for now." She set the journal down, exhaled. Because the real story, the one that mattered, wasn't just what happened on that tarmac. It was what people saw in it, what it revealed about where we are, what it reminded us about who we still need to become. Sometimes it only takes one person to stand still in a storm and say, "This is not okay," and suddenly other people remember they can speak too. Avery opened her phone again, scrolled past the noise, the interviews, the trending tags. Then she wrote something new, just a simple post. "Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong in a space you earned? Tell your story. Someone out there needs to hear it." She hit post. And just like that, the conversation continued. Sometimes the most powerful resistance is simply standing in your truth. Avery didn't shout, threaten, or beg. She just refused to disappear. This story reminds us that bias doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in uniforms, routines, and polite disbelief. But when we name it, face it, and share our stories, we don't just break silence. We open doors for others to step through too. If this story moved you, made you pause, or reminded you of something real, Like this video to keep these stories alive. Subscribe for more powerful tales that uncover hidden truths and celebrate the voices that refuse to be ignored. And in the comments, tell your story, because someone out there needs to hear it.